So thank you all for being sent. So what I'm going to talk to you about for the next 10 or 15 hours, it's around about how do we make time, and I'm going to focus. I'm going to just quickly check in. How many of you are coming tomorrow, by the way, just to the workshop? Grand, I'll think of new jokes. For the rest of those that aren't, I'm going to walk you through a story around NPJ paralysis, but also around time itself. But in order to do that, what I'd like to do is start with a very short video.
The day's almost over, the sky's about to show her the first glimpse of gold over waking up dreams. The thing is, I don't know why things that I felt so concerned with just let go and drift with the breeze. I've been running around looking for answers, and all of these days there still ain't enough. Like the moonlit late plains, let the questions just hang. All I need is time with your love. I've been running around looking for answers, and all of these days there still ain't enough. There ain't enough. Time with your love.
When you watch that short video, that 80-second video, which was created by my son, Will Dolan, who's a videographer, and he's my Sunday in every week. And you watch that, and you very quickly work out what is happening is everybody's got a number. We don't know what it might be, but there's a number. And you see the first number, you see the first one, there's a couple with a young baby in arms, and then you have a child and running through the park, and it's all filmed in Stratford-upon-Avon. I live in Stratford-upon-Avon. There about 4 or 5 months a year. I mean, across the ditch in New Zealand about 6 months a year, and here about a year. Just a much longer than average commute to work. That's all it is. But you see this kid running through the park, and everything is sweet and dandy in that couple's lives. One's got a baby in arms, and the partner tenderly kisses mum on the forehead. But what none of them know is she has 1,000 days left. Or you see the teenagers. Do you remember when we were kids? When we were all teenagers, we were bulletproof, weren't we? Life just span out ahead of us, and nothing was stopping. You see those three kids, and they're enjoying life. And in many ways, this is a canvas, this film. And what this film is quietly dedicated to my own best friend, Mark Mandel, who died on the 26th of February last year. And Mark walked in 2014. He'd been complaining of abdo pain. He walked into an emergency department, University College Hospital in London, with acute abdo pain. And by the time they transferred him to Swindon, about 15 days later, they'd removed half his bowel. But that's where the primary was. But they also found secondary in his liver, his omentum, his mesentery, his lung. Mark was terminal from the get-go. And the question I always had for Mark all the time, every time we spoke, which was all the time, was never, what's the matter with you? Because that was known, that was understood. It was always the question was, what matters to you, Mark? And what mattered to Mark was living long enough that he could see his 3 daughters growing to be as big as they could be. And then, he actually lasted about 1,000 days. And then you see the older couple, and Will's, my son's business partner, Asher, that's his dad and his brand new stepmom. And then at the very end, you see in a hospital bed, there's a nurse walking around the bed, and a woman in the bed, and the clock ticks down to 1,000. And here's the question for all of you. How many of your last 1,000 days would you choose to spend in hospital? What would that number be? How many? 0, wouldn't it, for most of us, or as few as possible. And this is about patience time. This is a bit of more, and I don't know if there's Professor Deborah Jackson here, Professor of Nursing at UTS, but I work with Deborah in Oxford. As you can see, basically, I'm a director of very, very pretentious job titles. But, and that's my Twitter handle. Now, just as a quick point about Twitter, it's not just about the Kardashians. It is the single best source of continuing professional development. I'm hoping Justin's mother might follow me. That sounded wrong, actually, didn't it, Justin? Your mother following me, but you know what I mean. So do please join Twitter. It's a fantastic thing. And Linda Holt, my business partner, in fact, Will's mom, and she's the most amazing person I've ever known. And we're not together with you, but she's an extraordinary woman, wonderful. And we co-created a new conceptual model last year, a model of change called the Today model. And tomorrow's workshop we'll go into it a lot more depth. But I will frame it around a few things, and this is one that impacts on time. If you come into hospital and you are 80 years of age, you spend 1 week like this. It's a special offer we'll give you. We'll take 20% off your quads power, you'll lose 1.5 kilos of muscle mass, and you'll lose 10% of your aerobic capacity. Spend 3 weeks like this, and you will lose a full 30 years of aging to your muscles. This is the 1966 Dallas study. But not only that, hospital inactivity is associated with a 48% increase in the risk of disability, a 48% increase in the risk of needing help with activities of daily living, 3 to 5 years of ongoing muscle weakness. For physiotherapy, only 66% of the expected 6-minute walk test, and after 1 week in hospital, this is what you will end up with in terms of being over 80, in terms of the impact of deconditioning. You are 5 times more likely, instead of going to your home, you go to a home. But we're not done yet. It's associated with accelerated bone loss through demineralization, malnutrition, delirium, sensory deprivation. 50% of people over 65 who are admitted to an acute hospital are incontinent or wet themselves within 24 hours. And then they get incontinence products and they end up having a smaller life. Because in the end, it strikes me that this is the central thesis, is that while we're busy and our time is important, our patient's time is sacred, because it is patient's time that is the most important currency in healthcare. And everywhere you look, time is the connecting currency of healthcare. You look at it in terms of the access target. I know Sue when she was Susan when she was the CNO. She was a fabulous CNO and clearly never lost her sense of droll humor. She's just a wonderful, wonderful woman. And she deals with access targets, as many of you do. But what are they measured in? Time. What are cancer weights, ED weights measured in? Time. What is harm associated? It is a consequence of time ill spent. The great work from WOHP by Drew Richardson in 2006, an ED academic, showed a 47% increase in morbidity and mortality at 1 week for patients with a protracted wait in emergency departments. Beds aren't capacity. What are beds? They're just simply places where people wait for things to happen. Supposing there was a prime minister and he said to you all, do you know what? Actually, we'll call him Malcolm, shall we? The name just popped into my head. And he says, I will give you double the number of beds, all the budget you need, all the staffing you need, and you're going to open these beds tomorrow. So you're going to have double in your hospitals. What would happen within a year? You'd fill them, wouldn't you? Because build it and they will come. Beds, therefore, are not capacity. Capacity is access to senior clinical decision makers and senior action takers. That is what constitutes capacity in a health system. If you are a brand new graduate nurse or a new therapist or an intern, they cannot make decisions. They can do a lot of activity, but they can't progress the patient through a system. And we hear it manifest in language like, what are we waiting for? Our registrar review. We're waiting for the physio to come and assess to see the patient. We're waiting for the nurse specialist to come and have a look at that wound. It's about decision making and action taking. DNAs, if somebody doesn't turn up at 9:30 today, you can't carry 9:30 to next week. It is gone. Even on the day patients go home, they're waiting for ward rounds and paperwork and scripts and surprised relatives who didn't know they were going home today. It's like, 10 days I didn't know they were going home. Or looking for equipment. Have you ever noticed there you are running around the ward? Like, I love the way you swear, Sonia, that's brilliant. Because like the Irish, the Irish and the Australians really get on. But the difference is, you know Mrs. Brown's Boys, don't you? You know how you all think it's a comedy. See, us Irish, we look upon it as a documentary. It's a big... I look at Mrs. Brown and think, that's my sister Denise and her family. She's got 6. But there you are, wandering around the ward like a blue arse file, looking for an obs machine, and then you find 2 of them huddling together like survivors off the Titanic. Waiting for people to call you back, being involved in pointless meetings. I bet that doesn't happen around here. Wouldn't it be brilliant if you know, before I answer to say yes to going to this meeting, can I just point out I only go to point-full meetings. You would go to 3 a year. And 70% of New South Wales health budget is spent on time. We call it part-time and full-time, but actually it's about salaries and wages. The bulk of a health service, and indeed the police service and most public services, actually the connecting currency is time, and your time is your most important currency. It's about using it well. And in PJ Paralysis, you know, it's brilliant seeing Zoe Tonkin. I know you're there somewhere. There you are, from Far West, because NPJ Paralysis, can I tell you, was born in Broken Hill. Susan asked me to go to Broken Hill about, 2014 now, 2014-15, to work with the really fabulous people. And I'd done a tweet. I was having a meeting with the SARU, the subacute rehab unit nurse manager at the time. And I was having a conversation with some colleagues, and they'd sent me a tweet, and I tweeted back, but the thing is this: nursing was born in the church and raised in the army, and we put people in a uniform called pajamas. Let's fix that. In November 2016, which very quickly turned into End PJ Paralysis. But if you've ever wondered why there's a department called ICU, can I tell you why? This will be, now you know. But you know, our patients, they know there's something wrong, and they feel vulnerable and disadvantaged and disempowered. But the thing is, they may own their sickness, but they don't own their journey of where it's going. And we've known this for fully 70 years. Richard Asher, who also, by the way, coined the term Munchausen's, a great physician, and he talked in 1947 about the dangers of going to bed. And he talked about there was no body system that was not impacted by this. And he wrote a little ditty, you know, teach us to live that we may dread the grave as little as our bed. But there's no body condition. You know, you think about the alimentary canal, due to staying in bed means that the peristalsis slows down, leading to constipation. Sarcopenia as a consequence of demineralization of bone. Urinary retention, osteoporosis. The bit that's not in this slide here, by the way, is lethargy. Because look, we all know what it's like. You know, you've been in bed for a few days and you just feel miserable, don't you? And lethargy has the psychological, emotional impact of being in bed, has a real impact on people's well-being. But Julia Harvey did some really interesting work. This is the sitting and lying time in a rehab ward compared to the amount of time older people spend on the move when they're in the community. And I would love it, this is a personal thing, I would love it if we shut rehab beds. Not ortho or neuro, but you know, too many patients go to rehabilitation, to recondition from the deconditioning that occurs while they're in hospital. And we could see this as a great hallmark of success of a health system when we close or repurpose those beds, because what we will know is happening is we're making it better for people that they are mobilized. And ownership is about taking responsibility. It's about stepping up and owning the issue, owning the cause. And it's very powerful. It echoes as what Sonia was saying. It's very powerful and enabling when that happens. But you know what happens? People say, oh well, you know, nobody listens to me, I'm no real voice, no control. By the way, can I just check in? How many here are nurses in the room? Well, look at that, a small forest went up. We are brilliant, you know. This might be an image of a nurse, but it could just be a doctor, it could be a therapist, it could be a manager. But as nurses, we are the best in the world at this thing. It's called, I call it WOHP syndrome, and it stands for the most oppressed people ever. Nobody knows our suffering. It's just not fair. But we have to take back our ownership, you know? Because the fact is this, every single person makes a difference to someone or something. You're not off duty for a heartbeat. And if you don't think of yourself as a leader, actually leadership is not a job title, it's a set of behaviors. The healthcare assistant can be a leader. And when you are walking down and you're distracted, you're thinking about patient flow, you're thinking about a meeting you ought to go to, and you walk past the cleaner, you may not notice, but they will. How you behave when you're ordering a cup of coffee. It's about how you treat people who can't do much for you. Although, mind you, when it comes to health systems, the people who give you the cup of coffee, they own it. But it's about showing respect, and we all matter to somebody. Because this is patients' lives. That is patients' lives, that is the bit in hospital. If I said to you, what were you doing in 2007, most people say, I can't remember actually. But if I said, well, did you go to hospital? Can you tell us what year it was? We always remember that. They are a big part of our lives. But one thing we cannot overdo is we cannot over-communicate our messages. You know, most leaders under-communicate by a factor of 10. It's interesting, isn't it, that Susan was talking about 97% of people were getting into their lectures in time, but nobody was saying that because we cannot over-communicate. And just because people have a lot of questions, tomorrow afternoon in my workshop I'll be doing a session about dealing with difficult personalities. And the type of people we are in healthcare, we ask a lot of questions. That doesn't mean people are against something, it's a processing pace. And you've got to be real and honest and authentic and open, but it takes time. Change takes time, and we may have one health system, but within it there's 1,000 different villages, and everywhere is uniquely similar. Because what followers need is clarity. They need clarity of purpose, that's your why. Clarity of your plan, that is your what. And clarity of responsibility is your who. And once you have those clarities, by the way, you'll all get a copy of these slides if you want them. You're very welcome to have it. I don't believe in hoarding this stuff. You get people believing, actually, do you know what? I want to be part of this. And when it came to NPJ paralysis, people start to say, do you know what? This is a bit of fun. And this is Courtney Baines, who's a social media manager at Cambridge University Hospital, who's got a thing about Lego bricks. So on his desk in the hospital, he created these Lego characters. And you got both hearts and minds. He rebadged Addenbrooks to Addenbricks. And what he very generously did is he gave away his slides and put the badges of people everywhere. So I've seen this in Narendra, in Murrumbidgee Local Health District, with their local 140 organisations have now got this. Can I just do a quick time check, if you would, please? So 26 minutes done or going? To go. To go. That's fantastic. Right, I'll go for a cup of tea and I'll be back. The thing is this. Sorry. So I flew over from Christchurch last night. And you know the way it is. And you do this in Australia, I know, all the time. Is there any Kiwis in the room, by the way? Oh, there, just one. The rest of you, just one. They're going to need reinforcements. But you know when Australians are abroad, Kiwis are abroad, certainly when the paddies like us, do you know when you meet an Australian somewhere overseas, you'd walk past them on the street in Sydney, but you're overseas thinking, oh, I'm going to talk to them, I like the accent. And we do that. And I was on the flight last night and overheard one of the stewards. She had an Irish accent and she's from the county next from me. Before I knew it again, gin and tonics poured at me, because you just do. How nice is that? So, but it's about looking after one another. And when people are engaged, they will automatically look out for one another. But here's the thing. Why should you do this? Why should this matter? Why does patient time count? Why does mobilization make any sense? Well, here's 4 reasons. Patient's time is the most important currency in healthcare. 10 days in a hospital bed, it's 10 years of aging of muscles to people over 80. 46% of people over the age of 85 will die within 1 year of a hospital admission. Clark's work from 2014. And if you had 1,000 days left to live, how many would you choose to spend in hospital? And once we grasp that, it transforms the whole way we conceive it. And I do like, at the same time, it might be about the heart, it's also about the minds as well. And I do love this Palestinian proverb, you can't fatten a cow by weighing it. And what they've done in Royal Free in London, which is in Hampstead, which is so posh there that the babies aren't born, they're delivered. And what they did there is on their ward, they had, to get the patients up and dressed on this medical ward. And they started to do, they had balancing measures, they had process measures, they had outcome measures. But what they really did is they engaged people. And there they all are in their PJs at work, because that really started to take off a couple of months after Chloe Harris, who I'll tell you about shortly, started doing this. The Lion King featured. But this was led by an occupational therapist, Rosie Skrypak, and Eduarda, who is the nurse manager, and Peter is in there somewhere, that's Peter I think, who is a healthcare assistant. So how do we get people up and about and moving? But what's also important is, what does the patient think? And Veronica, a patient, said, it's a great thing the team are doing. I feel much more comfortable in my own clothes. Because when we humanize patients, we also end up humanizing ourselves as well. But it's also being acutely mindful of the language that we use. This was a study done by the British Geriatric Society and Age UK a couple of years ago. And what they asked the public was, non-specialist clinicians, what comes to mind when you hear the word frailty? Because everyone is rushing to open up frailty units. And this is what people saw, needing support, cancer, end of life. And then they asked members of the general public, what do you think when you hear the word frailty? And this is what they had to say. Can't do anything, shriveled, wasting away, skinny, weak, tiny. Our language really, really matters. As somebody who's an emergency nurse, I would never talk about triage, because what does triage mean other than something they did to grade, Napoleon's Lafare, his surgeon, and grading coffee beans. But to most members of the public, it's, well, I just turned up in the emergency departments. And our language is important, and we have this unintentional ageist language. So we talk about the demographic time bomb, as if you've got all these old people waiting to go off, or the tsunami of aging. Instead of celebrating the fact we have never lived as long as we do, we think about it as a threat. And you see the headlines, have the older people, have the boomers stuffed it up for the millennials, as if it's our fault for living. Acopia. It's unusual, but I was a clinical director of a couple of emergency departments as a nurse. And you'd see, dear doctor, please see, patient has acopia. I think most of the millennials, all they're dealing with is aphasia. Suffering from dementia, not living with it. In fact, just to quickly go back, the word fragile comes from the medieval Latin and French, meaning fragile or poor morals. Look at the linguistic misogyny that you face. And, did you know you can have an incompetent cervix? I didn't know this. I didn't know you had to do an exam to have one. Or failure to dilate. Can I just tell you, in Ireland, the west of Ireland, when I trained, 8 was the number you rang to get the emergency team. And somebody rushed into the ward, the charge just ran and said, dilate, Brian, dilate. I was thinking, what do I dilate? I mean, it was a number, apparently. But also failure to thrive. I know of a woman who she cried when she was told that her child had failure to thrive, because she felt she was failing that child as a mother. Elderly prima gravida. I can't remember what the age is, but my God, if you're over 30, that's it. And even an irritable uterus. It's almost like, I don't like to be now, you have to stay. And in fact, the word hysteria, as many of you may know, it actually originates from the Greek for uterus, because we never talk about hysterical men, do we? Hysteria. And can I just commend to you a great book by Joan Smith about misogynies, and a wonderfully funny book, but a real beautiful treatise. I gave it to my son by Emer O'Toole, an Irishwoman, called Girls Will Be Girls. Really brilliant. All men should read that book. But what about the battlefield metaphors we use? We talk about the war on cancer. We talk about the battling disease and the fight against heart disease. We talk about fighting infection. We talk about aggressive treatments. And if a patient is really good, we talk about their immune defenses. And if they're really, really good and compliant, we reward them with the term brave. We turn their bodies into a mosaic of detachable pieces on which we fight wars. So how do you foster something which is mindful of language, mindful of engagement, mindful of trust? Because the whole campaign, the whole thing around time is founded on trust. You got people creating their own videos, they're creating posters. And I love this one here, this poster here, and these are all done by discretionary effort. And I popped out very briefly with Susan saying, what I think made the difference for you last winter, was the fact that what there is engagement at discretionary level. It is discretionary effort that makes a great organization, not the transaction, not the contract. It's the people who take a call at 10 o'clock to say, yes, I will help you. But this picture here is a story essentially of cognitive bias. Because if you see somebody in bed, the clinical team, the medical team come around, they see the woman in bed and they say, oh yeah, you look looking better. Let's see how you go tomorrow. But you see somebody up and dressed and the medical team say, gosh, you're looking really a lot better today. The family come in and say, God, ma'am, you look fantastic. Look at you. You were terrible yesterday. Look at you now. You're great. And what's the person herself going to think? Do you know what? I feel a lot better. And then Michelle Casey, a nurse educator friend of mine, says, you know, in the end, what woman wants to be seen in a hospital bed where she's seeing her friends and her family and she's not even wearing her lippy or a bra? And actually, I thought there was a lot of truth in that. It's about giving people their dignity and their choice. And people are creating leaflets. Linda and I created a workbook called The Last 1,000 Days, which goes into the detail of all of this as well. And if you don't believe you have to be in a senior role to get into leadership or to make leadership decisions, here's one of a real fantastic leader who I've asked would she speak on my behalf at the World Congress of Physiotherapists next year in Geneva, and her name is Chloe Harris. She was a newly qualified graduate physio a year or so ago, and she had her granddad who always got dressed. And when they said to her, why do you get dressed? It's because I've always got dressed. And in his honor, and indeed subsequently in his memory, she said, you know what it must be like to be in pajamas? Because I haven't a clue. Why don't we all come to work in our PJs? And she got all her therapy colleagues all getting dressed at work in PJs. And it started something really big. All over the place, you're seeing people in their PJs at work. You got this. I love this photograph. This is last week. This is a young. All these obviously have got permission from patients. It's a young patient, and she's in her PJs, and they're lobbing the pajamas over it, and they're having great crack. The Irish variety, just to make that clear. You know, awkward. I've learned there's some words you cannot use in Australia. In Ireland, you'd be going to you'd be told to get some clothes out, and you'd be rooting around in the cupboard. Apparently, you can't do that in this country. Not the same way. Not to be done. Awkward. You can see all of this stuff. And by the way, if you've ever been wondering, if you look at the bottom right-hand picture, finally, after years of looking, we finally found Wally. He's there. And what's important is people are having fun. They're having fun and joy at work. And that is so important. I'm on a mission to get wheelchair races back, to getting that. But here's the other thing. Two things were occurring to people. They said, you know what, it was really good fun, but it felt a bit weird at work in my PJs. I kind of felt vulnerable. And you want that. You want people to feel vulnerable because they're going to say, it's actually, if that's what it's like for me, what must it be like for my patients? Who might be women who have never been in pajamas in a public space before. And particularly our medical colleagues, seniors who are doing this, and it has transcended all of the different disciplines, and they are saying things like, do you know what was really weird? I've worked in this ward now for 20 years. I've worked with that nun for about 15 of them. She walked straight past me, didn't even see me. Because people become invisible in PJs, don't they? Pajamas are a uniform. And what's been brilliant is our medical colleagues, geriatricians, the older people services, they got this years ago. For physios, this is their model of care. As my son points out, I didn't even train in the last century. I trained in the last millennium. And, it's like we did this. We used to get people up. It's just kind of bringing some of this stuff back. And this is Aileen Horgan, who's a nurse manager in Cork University Hospital. I was there this time last year. And she had two patients. And they were two men, and they both had dementia, and they were waiting to go to a care home placement. And they got them up and dressed and moving. And instead of going to a home, they ended up with their cognitive and physical and functioning improving to a point where they went back to their home. And what would it be like if you've got people on your wards who are waiting to go to a care home placement who ended up going back to the place that they called their home instead? The nurses in Dublin, in the emergency department in Dublin, came up with this line: don't leave your identity at the door, keep it with you. Because we do, don't we? And we socialize patients into being patients, don't we? You know, they call the GP, and if there are known patients to the GP say, well, look, I know you pretty well. I'm going to organise an ambulance. We'll get you to pick them and they'll take you to hospital. Or they pop out and they get an ambulance, and the patient walks onto the ambulance. And then they're put onto a trolley. And then they're wheeled into ED on the trolley. And then they're transferred onto a trolley in ED where they marinate for hours. And then they're wheeled up to the ward, and then they're pat-slided over to a bed. And 2 days later, they said, oh, I must have been very sick. They wouldn't even let me get off the bed. I'm very bad, you know, I'm terrible. It's true, isn't it? We have socialized patients into being patients. And why are they called patients? Because they have to be. Because they wait. These are some very poor quality picture, I'm sorry, but they're created in the NHS. A good friend of mine created these badges, which became so popular. They're worth about half a kidney now on the black market. They become really, really popular. And if you were going to start something, I'm in Wagga Wagga the week, isn't that a great name? You've got the best names, you really do. But I'm in Wagga Wagga the week after next to the week, as I've been a couple of weeks the last couple of years. And if you're going to start something, I didn't wake up one morning and think, do you know what? I really fancy starting a global social movement just for the crack. It doesn't work like that. But if you're going to start something, you may as well go in boots and all. So there I was in International Nurses Day with Karen. Anybody here, by the way, from Murrumbidgee LHD today? There you are. So how are you? So waving away in the corner, because I know you're far away. Not as far west as far west. But, you know, there's Karen Kearney, the lead LHD Don. There's Beck Broadbent, the regional education lead. And that's Karen's teddy bear, just for the record. But that is my Wee Willie Winky number. Actually, I just did a Channel 7 interview wearing that number. But, you know, when you bring fun back, and we need to do that, it's really important. You know, do any of you remember you'd be, you know, if you're a male nurse as a student, you might be sent to pick up some fallopian tubes on the surgical ward, or sent off for a long wait, you know. And and the police service, we've got all that. We need to bring that back because it's important that we do. But what about the numbers? Well, they've been running it for about a year now in the T&O ward in Nottingham University Hospital, and there's some of the things that they found from mobilizing patients and really working at it. A 37% reduction in patient falls. 1 in 25 people with a fractured neck of femur, they get it in hospital. And it happens usually on the day they're being discharged or the day before. Why? Because they've been in bed for ages, they've deconditioned, they tip over, break their hip, and many of those never go home. So a 37% reduction in falls. An 86% reduction in pressure ulcers. Because if you're not in bed, you're not going to get pressure ulcers. An 80% reduction in patient complaints. And if you're a nurse manager or a NOM chasing reports, actually it means that you've got more time to lead rather than constantly feeling you're reacting. But more than that, it's also a proxy of patient as well as staff well-being. And a 1.5 day shorter length of stay based on a spot audit. So what is it that makes this come together? Well, a lot of it is about leadership. And almost 70% of a team's performance is a direct consequence of the style of the manager. Many of you will know Alex Ferguson had a stroke over the weekend, and the extraordinary things, now I'm not a big Man United fan, my team is Oxford United 0. And the extraordinary thing about Alex Ferguson is he brought the best in these amazing players. And he didn't just have a team of champions, he created champion teams consistently because he treated them differently. He didn't treat them the same. And great leaders know what people are like. They draw them, they reflect and celebrate, but they also say, how can we even be better? So they adapt their leadership styles accordingly. And here's a question to reflect on through the day, which they will tomorrow, is if you could make an impact on just one thing, what would it be? Because I think it's fine to be doing massive big projects and they have their place, but what it would be like everywhere you work if you created 1,000 stories of small change and see how that accretes into something amazing and massive. And here's somebody who did a small change which has made a difference. Jennifer Helen, who's an occupational therapist, created these, you would know it would be no tea, wouldn't you? You know, created these cut-out pajamas, and people started writing pledges of how they would value people's time to end PJ paralysis, to promote patients, to get them dressed and now to get them moving, to making life more normal for our patients, to promote people getting up and dressed. And you can see where she used some of the stuff I've been talking about, and people making commitments. And when you write something down, psychologically you make a contract with yourself. That's why if you write something in pencil, you can rub it out. If you write it in pen, it becomes more real to you. And people have been putting up posters all over the place. We're running a campaign I'll tell you about in a moment. And you can see, because patients and carers are the most underutilized resource in our health system. And carers want it to be better. They want to make a difference. And sometimes all they want to know is, what do you want me to do? And we can liberate them by being creative. And this is a care home manager in Essex who woke up one night with an idea. And the following day she decided, do you know what? We need to do something about falls in this care home. And she'd been watching a program, and she saw, I got an idea, why don't we try this? Let's pimp my Zimmer. And what you can see is people improve their social inclusion. Because if you think about it, I mean, grey is a rubbish colour for frame, isn't it? People with cognitive decline, grey is not seen so easily. They don't recognise it's their Zimmer, so they weren't using them. By dressing them up a bit, people start to get up, walk around, get engaged. But look at the reduction in falls that they saw. And I don't know about you, but I think your man on the left, I don't think he's from the west of Ireland. But isn't it just joyous to see that? I mean, you know, you can really go for it if you want to. But the lovely bit is people are taking such pride in what they're succeeding, and they're having a real meaningful impact as well. And we decided, let us capture what we're doing. So before Christmas, and as Susan alluded to it, you know, the wheels completely fell off the NHS bus. There'd never been more fluid jabs, but in fact, you know, it was absolutely hammered in the winter, the northern winter. But despite that, unbelievably, 91,728 patients were up and dressed and moving at a time in the middle of winter. So that was a 9-hospital big PDSA that we created. And now, right now, we're in the middle of something even bigger. The 4 chief nursing officers of the UK are behind it, and our goal is a 1 million campaign. And what we've created, it's not out in Australia yet, is an app. And on the app, it only asks 2 questions, that's all. We did not want to have people collecting a lot of data, so there's only 2 questions. And your questions are this: how many patients are dressed in day clothes at midday? How many patients have mobilized to the toilet, to the shower, around the bed? That's it. That's all people are collecting. And it's available on the app stores, and people have been downloaded. We've just last week or so, 10 days ago, we created an online portal. There's a whole bunch of other stuff we're doing in creating this, because the power is not in the app in your hand. The power will lie in the data. So in the next week or so, we'll be able to capture people will be able to look by country, by hospital, by specialty, and even by individual wards. And already what we're finding is people saying to us, right, when is this out? Because we want to know how our ward is doing against that shower across. We're not letting them beat us. You know, and it's good. It's fun, healthy competition. And needless to say, when you have competition going on between hospitals, who are the winners? The patients. And it's also about choice, and that's important. So people have been committing with their pledges. We're praying to God that Theresa May doesn't commit a pledge. But the Welsh minister has, and because I'm in New South Wales, here's the Welsh version of the pledge. GP surgeries are becoming engaged in how they can support it. And I love these filters. If you stick all over Twitter, you're seeing this sort of stuff all over the place, of people up and dressed. A man who gets home for his 80th birthday. Yesterday, there was a global event where the NHS got a new call sign, first ever, and it was around the ham radio, amateur radios all over the world were plugging into this thing. And there's been an email overnight from Virginia to say they want to take part. And here's the words of patients themselves, and this matters. You know, the nurse washed my hair and got me dressed this morning. I feel 100% better. It makes me feel very tall. I quite like that one because I'm not. You know? When I'm wearing my own clothes, it makes me feel like me. Doesn't that just fill you with joy when you see that sort of stuff going on? And here's the poster boy, by the way. Here's the poster boy. I encourage anyone to get up and about, not stay in the pajamas. I can get myself dressed. I go for a walk and even have a brew up here. It helps me feel right. It gets me ready to go home. And this is the thing. If you are 70 years today, you know, you're now 70-year-olds. In 1968, you were 20. So you weren't listening to, like, I don't know, Dame Vera Lynn. You were listening to the Stones, the Who, the Beatles. Probably Akadaka were in their garage preparing to take on the world. It was the 1968 riots. You know, our job collectively is we are archaeologists. Our job is to look past the ruins to the treasures that lie within. That's what our real job is about. And this is the impact in just 17 days that it's had in terms of engagement. And this is where we stand as of this morning, 131,138 patients. We have some data we're having to put in. We've now validated it'll add another 114,000 on that journey. Could I have some coffee? It starts at the front door. We've had, by the way, was that 5 or 2? 2. Can I speak real quick? Or just make slightly shorter questions? Somebody wore this last week on Independence Day, and I wore "Wake Up Happy," and I thought, I love your thing. I love this. This could become the anthem of NPJ paralysis. And before you know it, everyone was pouring. I've got some ideas, and there was a Spotify list created. Walking back to happiness, take me out. Here it goes. We don't have to take our clothes off unless it's consensual. And I had an idea. It was in August or July, I think, and it was in late at night in Christchurch. Somebody put in a line from Bohemian Rhapsody, and I thought, oh, I like that. 25 minutes later, I'd rewritten the words of Bohemian Rhapsody to an NPJ paralysis team. But you know, is this the real life or PJ fantasy? Caught in a pat slide, no escape from reality. You know, and it goes on, you know, pajamas just killed a man, put some PJs on his bed, made him wear them, now he's dead. And we have a Facebook page. This is a flash mob that turned up, and they sang it. And what they lacked in vocal prowess, they did not lack in enthusiasm, so I urge you to look at that. The thing is this, all of this does, whether it's NPJ paralysis or Last 1,000 Days, what it's about, and it's here and true in New South Wales, is about creating social millionaires. And what are they? Well, every day, social millionaires undertake 1 million acts of kindness around the New South Wales health system, so people don't feel vulnerable or lost or afraid. But it's also a reminder of why we came in and why it matters. And why does the last 1,000 days matter? Well, in around 90 seconds, if you'll give me that. Oh, I'll stop then, if I may. I'm going to take 90 seconds or so. But actually it's this. I was in Christchurch about 10 years ago. I was talking to a group of elder care physicians, and we're talking about waste and waste of time, waste of process, waste of lean. And what we talked about was this. It just idea popped into my head. And it's this. If you're a white Australian man, you can expect to live to about the age of 79. If you're a white Australian woman, you can expect to live to the age of about 83. But supposing you're an 80-year-old woman or a 76-year-old man, what have you got left? Well, what you have is 1,000 days. Now, I know that, you know, if you survive childhood, survive to the age of 10, life expectancy goes up. The longer you live, I mean, there's really good research evidence that shows that people with the most birthdays live longest. That's been well established. That's how I became a professor. But actually, what you think about it, 2 out of 3 people in hospital are over the age of 65. Many are in their last 1,000 days. And that is why what we do collectively has moral purpose. Every day somebody waits longer than they must in a hospital is stealing their time. Every hour they wait to go home is stealing their time. Every weight that they've got is time that's been stolen, and now that time is special. And we sometimes treat old people as if they've got all the time in the world, yet to my mind, they're the ones in a hurry. But at the same time, please God, all of us in this room, we will be that 80-year-old woman or that 79-year-old man, and we will look back on our last 1,000 days. And there's something powerful that John Steinbeck said. He said, you know, far away in the future, the 1,000 lives we could have led are waiting for us to show up. But when we get there, it'll only have been one of them. Because each of us here could have made different choices with our lives. Each of us could have done a job that wouldn't be as hard, that wouldn't have kept us away from our families studying. It wouldn't be wasting family events. It wouldn't have taken us all over the place working. We would have done jobs maybe that would have paid us better, but instead what we did, collectively, including Sonia, is we chose a life of service. And I think when we look back on our last 1,000 days, we can look back and say, you know what? I may not have got rich. I may not have got famous, but I mattered. And if in your life you can say, I was loved, I mattered, I was enough, that's a great life. So we should never really, I think, be afraid to dream out loud at high volume. And know that you can make a difference, that you matter, because it counts, because we can look back and say, you know what, I stayed to make it better. This place, this world, this country, the one on the Eora nation on which we stand, or the Gadigal people, it is a better place. And I love, if you don't mind me inserting a Kiwi into my last slide, the most extraordinary Kiwi of all, who said something about this. He said, you think about it, leadership starts from within. It's not they that stop us doing stuff. It's not the Susans, it's not the Rachels, it's not, actually where our leadership starts is within us. And Edmund Hillary said, in the end, it's not the mountain we conquer, but ourselves. So thank you so much for your time.
When you started the end of Pyjamas, what was it?
NPJ paralysis.
Yeah. Did they have to get permission from somebody higher to do that?
Hopefully
the
not.
The ward just started.
Yep, that's what most of them. Somewhere you had the Don saying, well, let's all do it together. Somewhere it was like the HCA said, how do you feel about this? So it's actually been both a bottom up, but what's been really great has been top down as well. It's been an and. But Chloe Harris just had a word with her, Emily, her boss, and say, how do you feel about this? And Emily said, I'll back you, because it's built on trust.
Good, thank you.
And what's been really powerful is the conversations it's led to for patients as well. And there was a piece on the BBC News recently said, well, I saw all the nurses and the hospital aides and the therapists were in their pyjamas, so I thought I better get up and get dressed then. So it should have been a role reversal. Thank you for that question. So, thank you so much indeed. Thank you.